Hello,
Jason,
everyone. My name is Jason Pitre of Genesis of Legend Publishing, and welcome to D51 NPCs as Design Elements. Let's introduce the panelists. So, as I said, Jason Pitre, Genesis of Legend Publishing, and Sin.
I'm Sin. I am Diwata ng Manila on most of my social medias. I am a game designer from Metro Manila, Philippines. My pronouns are they, them.
And apologies, my pronouns are he, him.
Hi, I'm Zedeck, he, him. I make zines and RPG adventures. With Artist Macau, I make Thousand Islands. And I'm currently trying to finish a third draft of an adventure called Maze of the Monkey King, which I'm having trouble with designing NPCs for. That's why I wanted to be part of this, I guess. So, ulterior motive.
Wonderful. So, the core question behind this panel is how can we use NPCs as an intentional element of game design? So I suppose the first question would be really, what function do NPCs serve in games?
I can start, I guess. For me, NPCs are a bit of a driving force for me. I don't think I've ever actually run a game or been in a game where an NPC hasn't affected me as a player, or affected my players in a major way. I think that NPCs are a good driving force for, say, plot, for even character development of the player characters. They are a good anchor for players to go back to whenever they feel like they don't remember certain things in the world anymore, or they're also a good place to get their plot hooks. They're also a good place. The NPCs, I think, are also a good way for you to establish connection for player characters to the world. In advertising, for example, we learned that ads that have a face, a human face, do so much better versus ads that don't. So NPCs are kind of like that. They make your world more engaging and appealing. And yeah, that's basically what NPCs are for me.
Is it possible to have a game without NPCs?
It
No, because
is.
no, I guess where I'm coming from is because even when playing the most traditional of Dungeons and Dragons old school sort of experiences where you dungeon crawl, the kobold with the funny voice is the thing that players get hooked onto, in my experience. So the environment very quickly becomes an NPC of sorts. Creatures are definitely NPCs. And a monster is really boring, right?
Yep. So there are odd cases where I'd say there might not be NPCs. So an interesting example would be Starcrossed. Starcrossed is a two-player game where, yeah, theoretically there might be two people on a date and a waiter comes by, a nameless waiter comes by to bring drinks. But there's no actual, it's functionally just background, a background extra. They aren't really a character. It's just the two player characters who are interacting. And there might be a few other ones like that, but for the most part, yeah, no. NPCs are absolutely baked in to games on whole, because it's you have a really hard time role playing unless you have things to role play
with.
Yeah, because I come from I come from fiction writing as a background, and even in texts where there isn't an actual persona or a character, there's the text itself is the character that interacts with the reader. So yeah, I don't know whether that kind of gets into it.
Oh yeah. The personification element is absolutely real. The bar where everyone knows your name is an NPC. A city can be an NPC. A religion can be an NPC. There's a lot of it all depends on where you put your scope of what is a character.
To add to that, in my earlier, I guess, campaigns, I realized that a lot of my players weren't really very social as well. They weren't social with each other, and they weren't social with NPCs. So what I did was I gave them a lot of pets.
Yes.
Encounter a lot of random cute animals, and they just get so attached, and now they just somehow have to save the world because it's the only world that this animal lives in. And honestly, it works really well. And I think that I think not a lot of my games happen now that there isn't some sort of cute animal in the background. Anything works really, and sometimes maybe that animal will talk. I don't know.
The cute animal
is an NPC. There's my cute animal.
Yeah, that's almost cheating. That's just too good.
It's definitely going to work for player buy-in.
I mean, I'm just thinking of Avatar: The Last Airbender. They got a whole bunch of Appa and Momo.
Momo, yeah.
I'm sorry,
those are NPCs.
Those are NPCs.
I'm super attached to them,
but we all love them.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a portion of Korra where there's a bunch of sky bison that are caged. And no, this cannot stand. It grabs you by the heart. Because cute animals. So the fascinating thing that I find is I see three interesting and key functions that NPCs fill. One, they are an anchor between the player character's fiction and the setting. So if I introduce a purple-robed priest with scarification who is helping the orphans, we have explained a lot about the setting and asked a lot of questions. So that is a anchoring element that brings the fiction of the setting into relevance for the player characters. They are used as interfaces for the GM. So as a GM, if I want to give information to the group, I speak in a funny voice and speak through the mouth of this scarred purple-robed priest. And they can also connect player characters. Because it turns out that purple-robed priest is Derek's ex-husband, and is actually a member of the same religious order as Lucille. So they work as anchors and sort of as glue. Like they connect bits of the fiction together in interesting ways and work as a good communication medium between these different portions of the game. Just a little anecdote. I ran a campaign of Apocalypse World. And unfortunately, my players decided to all play loner player characters. In an apocalypse that was a frozen wasteland apocalypse. I mean, I'm in Canada. That's kind of the default mode. 20 feet of snow. So we had one driver who wasn't connected to anyone. You can't control me. We had a doctor who was misanthrope. We had a savvy head. And we had a gunlugger. So none of them had NPCs baked into their characters. They didn't have a biker gang or a hard hold or any of those handy things that just generate NPCs for you. Which made things super hard because I actually didn't have many good interface points to interact with them to bring pressure. I mean, I can always say, well, your food is running out. You might as well go find someone who has food. But that's an awkward approach to GMing.
Especially for Apocalypse Now. Apocalypse World, which is very interpersonal, right?
Exactly. I literally had a brainer coming in from the wastes that helped. And technically the driver fell in love with his Jeep. It's Apocalypse World. This makes sense somehow. So yeah, but I had to really stretch to make this work, which is the fundamental reason why I started thinking about how important NPCs are from a design mechanism and wondering why the heck aren't we designing NPCs quite that intentionally?
I think there is a tendency, I guess, to, you know how when something is so baked into the world, or rather a game or a sort of mechanic, that you don't even think about it. I think NPCs is one of those things where like obviously, yeah, you're gonna have NPCs, so I guess that's why like people don't really make mechanics that are for NPCs, for the creation of, or for the guidelines concerning NPCs. I personally fell in love with the mechanics for like bonds, the bond system in Powered by the Apocalypse. I love the idea that there are certain. Sorry, my cat is like really needy beside me right now. But anyway,
that's an NPC with a really
yes,
specific
he's like
need.
right there.
The GM's trying to tell you something.
Yes, but anyway, I think that the bonds sort of system of Powered by the Apocalypse, where you can be deeply connected to an NPC beyond just like knowing their name or beyond just like getting the lore and exposition from them, was so interesting for me because that was my first encounter of an NPC being like, I guess, integral to the design. And I love that. I absolutely love that. And whenever I create my games nowadays, I always kind of like bring that in. Even if like it's not explicitly the PBTA bonds, I always kind of have some sort of a few questions or so that tackle that sort of thing. And I think that that's another thing. Like, how can NPCs just be more than pieces for exposition? Which is a good point that you made, Jason. How they are a hook for the PC's, what do you call it? The PC's like story versus actual lore. Like, I think
Yep.
that's a great bridge. Yeah, they definitely should be a bridge where, say, let's take an example of a common player trope where I played in this game before. I was a player where every single one of them their parents were all dead somehow. Every single PC, their parents were all dead somehow. But what my GM did was that they brought in the cousins, they brought in the aunts and the uncles, and so you can't escape from that, right? I think that there's always a way to kind of like bring in an NPC that can, I guess, drag in the PC deeper into the lore, and integrate them into the full story and the full plot. Yeah.
As a GM, my jerk instinct is to then drag each of them into their therapy sessions, and they all share the same therapist.
I love that.
Because all their parents are dead.
Are dead.
Like, there's some grief counseling going on there.
So I'm can I ask whether, because like, I mean, full disclosure, I don't design a lot of games from the first principles up, and I also tend not to play a lot of games which have which sort of mechanize the sort of storytelling process too much. So my question is, because I'm having trouble kind of parsing the issue about like the question of why don't we design NPCs more, because it's so integral to my work as when I write any text, any RPG text, and granted I write settings and or adventures. The NPC is the primary tool to create the set. Like in a lot of our Thousand Island zines, the NPC generator, which is a bunch of tables, giving you a sort of a very strong a physical thing that people immediately see, and a very strong thing that they want to do, like this person in the imagined space wants to do in that space, and just rolling on that to sort of create basically the town. Is that I'm wondering whether that is something that would apply to games that you folks also design, where it's basically the characters and their wants are basically what builds the world, and if players interact with the world at all, then they have to interact with these NPCs. Otherwise, you guys are not going to town at all. So just stay out camping and being like icon. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely an example.
Yeah.
So I have two games that I've designed that use NPCs in a strong mechanical way, if that would help. But go ahead, like you had something to say. Go for it.
No, so is the question then is by NPCs as a design element, do we then mean that how do we ensure that there is buy-in?
So there's actually a good comment in the chat that the NPC tables in each of the Thousand Islands are so evocative and telling about the setting itself. They're golden nuggets of setting. So your NPCs connect the setting to the players.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of role. So I've designed 2 games that deal with NPCs in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
In SIG Manual of the Primes, the way that you set up the game is you put an index card between each of the players, the player on the right and the player on the left. And then each of the 2 neighboring players contributes something from their character sheet onto that index card. So, for instance, we're both giants. So I write down giant on that index card. And my friend contributes, we worship Faralux, the Whisperer. Okay, so then that NPC is a giant who worships Faralux. So that is how that NPC knows the 2 of us and is effectively making a social connection between myself and those 2 other player characters.
Yeah.
Through intermediaries. Which also means that I can do things like, I'm going to pull on this NPC, and now I've dragged 2 player characters along for the ride. So it means that that I have a cast of people that can tug on different portions of the spider's web to move drama around.
And because the players did find the sort of connections they have to these characters, they are the tugging is almost guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Just to like add to the concept of PCs having to go through NPCs, otherwise they won't like be in that place at all. I think that's actually a really clever way to bring in NPCs and to make the PCs, I guess, be more attached, because they have some sort of like focal point, I guess is a good word for it. In the game that I'm designing right now, it's not out yet, but soon, hopefully. Navathem, part of its setup is also that you have 2 things. You choose 2 NPCs to become your peak and your shadow. When an NPC is your peak, they are kind of like they're amazing to you. You have so much admiration for them, and you answer questions like why, like, oh, why is it that you admire them so much? What happened in your life that made you admire them? What is it that they do that is so admirable? And then when they are your shadow, it's that sort of thing where you feel their influence in everything that you do. So this is different from admiration, because shadow is more like, I suppose the way that they are in your life is that there's so much of them also in you. So it's a little bit deeper than, say, peak. Peak is more like they're up on a pedestal for you, while shadow is like they're kind of like your best friend or something like that. So I personally think that that's actually inspired by the PBTA sort of mechanic of bonds, and I turned it into peak and shadow, because I can't imagine, for example, throwing them into just like a world without like any sense of, I don't know why I'm here. And like there are just some settings, I think, that is hard to get invested in and to exist in for PCs without NPCs. like what Zedeck said.
Without like
There's
sort of
always
preloaded NPCs with
there's
preloaded,
always
right?
that. And when it comes to like NPC generators, oh my gosh, NPC generators used to like save my butt like all the time. They would just be because you know how you're running the game, right? And then all of a sudden your PCs just fixate on this random person in
Yes,
the
yes.
center of town, right? And you're just like, what's their name? Like, their name is Mateo. You just suddenly
No,
now have to figure out the life of this person.
and
And I
then
think
the Mateo becomes the focal point of the thing.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
When they ignore all their bonds or like their preloaded
of course,
things,
yeah.
and like
yeah, for
Mateo's
sure.
the most interesting thing in the universe now.
Yeah, I would love for like more games, for example, to have more of an anchor for that. The just in case your PC suddenly fixate on the old man and living by the well, you know, that sort of thing. I think that games should really explore those sorts of relationships more, and even more than that, another thing that I aim to also eventually explore in my designs is what happens when those connections break or when those connections are or weaken over time, right? Like your PCs go from say village to village or they go away for a long time. What happens then to your NPCs that are left there? Like, are they still friends, or uh, is living away suddenly just like going to break your bond with those NPCs? I don't know. Yeah, it's those sort of things. I really hope to like explore that more eventually in design.
So, the other game that I have is a more complex system, like system of NPCs that I think is also illustrative. So this is for my game After the War. Basic premise is you are all effectively unlinked survivors of a galactic war in this settlement. Now, there's a bunch of neighboring settlements that each have their own political goals and allegiances. Each of those other settlements can be connected to one of the NPCs in your settlement. And the NPCs in your settlement can be connected to your PCs. So you never get a neighboring settlement directly affecting a player character. It always has to go through and be funneled through a non-player character who's important and at the heart of your settlement and your community. Which means that you wind up getting some fun stuff where the military base is pulling on one NPC, and the research station is pushing on the other NPC, and then that causes drama in the community. And if you try to disentangle it, you realize, oh, wait a second, this is because Black Sky Industries is doing something horrible over there. That's why we have problems. So it's a interface between these locations into these non-player characters into the player characters. It's these webs where you can pull on one to affect the other that I find as such an important mechanism, and there's so much potential on designing them. So the another good example of a game that goes in this general direction is 13th Age. So in 13th Age, there are 13 icons, super important characters or gods or whatnot, that are really important in the setting. And all of your characters are connected to at least one of them. possibly multiple. What this means is you effectively, the interaction and interrelationships and feuds between these 13 super powerful characters will inherently pull on the group. And vice versa. Your actions as a group can pull on this much larger conflict. What happens if both of you share a bond to a single icon?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's going to cause some interesting discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Which does a good job of anchoring you to place in the setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it could also work for a sort of situation that's much smaller in scope. So these characters could be people in the same town that you grew up in.
I mean,
can I
literally the old man at the well?
Yes.
Everyone knows the old man at the well. How do you know the old man at the well?
I have used
Literally,
the old
that's
man at the well
enough.
trope for several times. Yes. I think one of my favorite things about like that sort of dynamic where several people know a single person or a single NPC, and then they kind of their viewpoints are different for every PC. Like maybe one PC views that person as a mentor, the other one views them as a best friend, the other one views them as a rival, that sort of thing. I think that one of my favorite things to do is to really just kind of like let them huddle the PCs and tell them that, okay, from what you see, this NPC has plans to do X. What do you think is your response to that? And it can be very varied, because sometimes, like, what if the X thing is directly contrasting to the goals of the PCs, right?
Mm.
And then that creates more drama and more tension, because then what if the PC who is best friends with the NPC who's trying to do this thing is like, but I want them to succeed, and so it's just fun for me to watch them do that. I love single NPCs. Yes.
I was going to ask you, like I guess ask the both of you, like in a situation where the PCs all have, or where the players all have a relationship with a particular character, and the relationship is not, the relationship is a conflicting relationship. So there is a potential to have, like your mentor killed my father, kind of thing. And so, and the thing about it is that because some of the most rewarding sort of moments in my game, like it feels like it happened organically or by serendipitously, where there was an opportunity to basically say that to make this character, to have that be surprising to the players and myself, so that these two relationships were the same character. Neither they knew beforehand nor I, except when we played the session. There was an opportunity to make that happen.
Okay, so it was a bit of a play to find out moment. Am I right?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
rather the sort of situations of like the relationships you had with different people in the world worked out in game where there was this moment of surprise.
So I love using leading questions as a tool to create those.
Yeah.
So, why are you so angry with this NPC that you've just met?
Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with this old man at the well before? When was the last time you saw this person? As a like, hey, here's an opportunity for you to bring in a relationship. I love specifically the kind of like, yep, this is my brother. This is my ex-husband. I love the like family and romance or professional and religious, like different spheres of life glomming onto the same NPC. Because it makes them feel a lot more rich and well-rounded.
I think what I did was, because I actually encountered something like that recently. There was this one NPC who was the love interest of one of the characters. And the other character, the other PC, views that NPC as like an older brother, sorta way. And what happened was the PC2 caught PC1 and NPC making out.
Which is
traumatizing
so
PC2, and was suddenly like, oh no! So there's like this odd feeling between them afterwards that's like, I don't know how to feel about this. I saw you and my brother making out. This is really weird for me.
That's so good.
And I think what I did was, okay, well, if you're feeling weird about each other, what if let's establish a scene? And what I did was essentially I established a scene, or we established a scene between those two PCs that potentially brought them closer together. So sure, they feel awkward about the fact that the NPC is caught in the middle of this sort of situation, but now we've established that apparently the two PCs are also kind of close, and now they kind of can't really like escape the situation. And eventually they made up, and we're like, but yeah, that's kind of what happened there.
So if I can show another real jerk NPC mechanic I put in. So in After the War, whenever your character would be killed, you had the option of instead sacrificing one of the NPCs that you have a relationship with. This means the best tactical decision that you can have is to form relationships, positive or negative, with as many NPCs as possible. Due to the law of conservation of NPCs, which is literally a whenever you can reuse an NPC, do it.
Yes.
I'm going to be introducing the old man at the well, and that's going to be the person that you need for the MacGuffin. And that's also going to be your best friend from childhood.
Yeah.
That means that if I decide that I'm going to sacrifice my best friend from childhood, I've just effectively killed an NPC for someone else. And then you get all sorts of grief and mourning and with the repercussions of that.
All the drama.
So your incentive is to make as many relationships as possible. Because that is the tactical decision. Also, enemies count just as well.
Yeah, they do. I've seen I've seen campaigns where the PCs get really attached to the villain. In an almost like, hey, we haven't heard from our big bad in a while. How are they doing? Sort of way. I've listened in on campaigns like that before. I've always wanted to kind of like create something like that, where a mechanic where the villain is just as much like involved in the PC's lives as like everybody else. Um, because I think that that would be even more interesting, I suppose, where uh, as opposed to like it's just a face and a name that equals evil or something. I think, like, imagine if, for example, your rival from childhood is suddenly the big bad. Like that. What's that kind of a drama?
There's a trope that I adore, which is the superhero and the supervillain share one person they both care about in common.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, someone really hurt Miguel. So the superhero turns around, looks the other way as the supervillain goes and gets revenge. And like, they have relationships.
Yeah.
It complicates things.
Yeah.
So we currently have around 20 minutes left.
I just want to. Sorry, I just want to interject with regards to the sort of mechanic that you brought up earlier, which I'm having some trouble parsing because it does sound. I guess this is just me being squeamish, maybe. It sounds like the mechanic will result in players using people in the granted in the imagined space, but using people as basically as tactical chattel.
Yes, and there's a reason for it. The game itself is set 10 years after a galactic war where everyone's running around with trauma.
Right. So everybody's treating people. So everybody's in.
Yeah.
It's part of the design for people to dehumanize each other. Then.
Yep.
And players
and
to
instrumentalize each other.
Right.
Because they have unhealthy coping mechanisms.
I see. So that's kind of the point of the. I see now. Right.
You're right. No, it's a real terrible social thing. But no, that's the point.
Because it's like it's pretty neat how villainous the PC can be then. Yeah, as players,
the PCs aren't killing them off. It's a purely narrative of, well, I think, according to my sheet, I have enough points that I would die. Instead, the story's going to say that my best friend dies.
Right.
So it's not the player character is choosing it, but it's the bleed of it's the player making a cold-hearted decision.
I guess where I'm having trouble with it as a sort of design and a narrative thing is that it's kind of the opposite problem, or the carbon opposite problem of the you are getting points to act morally.
Yep.
Issue, which is then if you as the player are getting more tickets to have your play character play a moral character, what's the meaning of that morality?
So in my case, I know I shouldn't be digging so much into my specific game, but this is all about community drama and the integrity of a community. All of the NPCs that you got here are really important. They're vital links within that community. So when one of those nodes within the community breaks, then the entire community gets destabilized. And those are the problems that the player characters are supposed to be dealing with.
Yeah. But as players, you're encouraged to make to destabilize things further.
You are allowed to just kill off your character.
Oh,
It's your choice. This is instead of your player character dying.
I see. Huh. Okay.
So there is. Right.
Do you want to make the problem worse?
Uh-huh.
It's up to you.
Okay, I see the kind of. So it is the mirror opposite then of the thing where.
It's a horror
game. I'll have to pick that up. I'm so curious. I'll have to pick it up because I'm so curious now.
Because it really is a challenge to the players themselves.
Yep.
How moral will you act?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I find games on morality so. I don't have the proper words to describe how I feel about it because morality is so different across different like cultures and different like settings. I don't know. Like I don't know how to properly put a word to how I feel about like games that integrate morality because my context, for example, in like say I don't know Philippine mythology, for example, everything's so neutral. Like they're our deities or our things just exist as is in place. There's no real good or bad. They're just there. So like when you play a game where the PCs themselves have to decide about like their morality and stuff, it's just I find that so.
I think that I think this is where my sort of like difficulty to parse it is coming from because it's the in-baked sort of moral choices that like the mechanized moral choices that sort of trip me up when it comes to design like this. This is not a criticism.
No. And there's a bunch of different. So there is one entire game which is all about a deep dive into Catholic morality, ethics, etc. There's an entirely different game which is here's the sociology of a community. What's the pro-social community effect and what's the anti-social community effect? And each of those is a fascinating lens to look on NPCs and the kinds of dramatic challenges that you can present and explore. There's a lot there, and I wish that more people were playing with some of these tools because I'd love to see more.
I think that like a way to also like play into say morality is also to put in concepts regarding like principles because that's a completely different thing, right? You can have this sort of morality but with this sort of principle, and a person with a different set of morals and beliefs can have exactly the same principles, so you can technically work together, but in the end, like what is truly the end game here? That's sort of a thing that like it's a completely different story and probably a different conversation altogether. But
sorry to have gotten into it.
No, it's okay. I love it. I absolutely love it because then if you really think about it, every NPC also brings their own set of morals and beliefs and I guess principles, and like there's a question in the chat earlier that I saw something about how do you temper NPC influence towards PCs, and like that's something that is also something that we can probably talk about because they can influence PC actions, definitely. Like an NPC can entirely make a PC believe that what they're doing is right, even though if you scale back, it could potentially harm their entire village or something like that. You know, it's one of those things that like it also should probably be talked about when we
What's
get
the
into
context
the
of that?
I saw it in the chat like a while back.
Yeah, we've got a few questions in the chat that we should go through.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Perfect. Yeah, so we've got about 10 minutes left. So, so some of the comments in the chat that are worthwhile. Find that NPCs personify places, game themes, and aspects of the narrative. Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
There is the fact that some NPCs are literally representing places. Justin Files does a fantastic job of this. If there's a bar, you create an NPC that is the bartender. And that's how you are putting a face to the place.
The game made by BIM or Mometos, Children of Inang Uri, has you literally living on technically an NPC. It's a living, breathing creature that affects your community life. So that's also like, you know, NPC as a place. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. So we have a question from Tome of Tomes. How do you strike a balance between writing NPCs with intention for PCs to interface with the setting, but in a way that still provides PC narrative authority and story centricity?
Wow, that's let me think about that.
It's a question.
What a question. Wait.
So the question, yeah, go for it.
I was gonna what does so I guess I need to preface this by context also, because I run games which are where I do tell my players, we'll discover who you guys are in as we play. And because that's the principle of it, how they interact with the NPC and what the NPC wants is the centrality of their narratives. So the idea is that the NPC is becomes an integral part of whatever character arc they might be going through. I'm not sure how true this is with how other people run their games.
I mean, yes, I view that this is actually a question of active versus reactive NPCs.
Right.
Is this an NPC walking up to the PC saying, look, you have to do this because XYZ? Or is this a situation that the NPC is sitting there, and if you come up and talk to them, they'll give you some information? I see an NPC comes up and demands that you do something and is being pushy and is trying to shape your narrative. Like, that's a thing. You still get to choose how you respond to it. So you still have player agency.
Right.
But, super active NPC, a GM NPC can railroad things and push things along in a way.
I see the problem. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
In which case it's a problem of dramaturgy then, right?
Yep, it is.
It's like you don't want the NPC to come up and be a unskippable cutscene, and you don't want a PC to be a exclamation point. But those two are almost like how I think those two extremes are almost how we are kind of couched into thinking binarily in terms of like, it's like such a video game, whereas there are any numbers of ways to sort of like to block a situation, blocking as in like stage a situation where there is there is a happening as you roll into town where something is happening, and the scene that is happening is something that as a game writer or a game designer, you know that your players would respond to or be likely to respond to, and sort of create situations or story blocks that feed into having that happen more.
I personally think it's all about impact, isn't it? Like, it depends on the NPC's impact. Like, if do they feel like a character that the PCs will respect, such that they will listen and they will take the advice of the NPC, or is it more of just this is a random person in town and it just so happened that they overheard a plot hook from them? I guess it's impact. It's always about impact.
I had a question, like regarding impact. I had a question in my notes about this. It's like that I was wondering whether you guys have like, how do you because there's this cool NPC that I have happening, but if the NPC doesn't, like, between me describing this character and the players sort of experiencing this character in their imagination, there is not enough sort of they're not seeing it, they're not seeing them, so they're just rolling by because it's just a dude sitting on a bench, as opposed to like it's a dude that had that dropped a thing that rolled up to you, and there were this seal is the seal of the old empire.
I love that.
How do you create NPCs that have that kind of impact? Like, they are immediate. They have a visceral reaction to for the players.
I think it really depends also on how your characters were created at onset.
Right.
If you have provisions in your game that let the players and the player characters talk about what is important to them, what is key to their story, it is easier to make impact as an NPC. Like you said, the rolling insignia of like the emperor or something. Maybe that is impactful to the PC precisely because, say, they served under the emperor before, so it catches their eye, right? Like, without you having known that about the PC, that would not really be impactful or anything like that. I think that there should also be, like, beyond having scaffolding for creating NPCs, there should also be scaffolding in games that really bring out what it is about the PC that makes the PC, I guess.
Right.
Or at least that's how I negotiate impact.
Surface area that grinds with the PC.
Yeah, something like that. Especially if you're play to find out, right? When you're running games that are play to find out, you get like base level of the PC at the very beginning. But then when you create the mystery of the rolling insignia, when you're on play to find out, you now then get to create something else entirely about the PC that affects them in that certain way right there on the spot. So like that's also, I think that's maybe that's a good way to manage impact. I think so, at least it brings people in, at least.
I mean, I have a dramaturgy style answer to this. Is you find out what is important, what are the thematic elements that are key to the player characters, and then you reincorporate those through NPCs.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if one of your player characters was a soldier, then you have a washed-up veteran who's begging for coin. And the fact that you're reincorporating those elements of their backstory, and you're giving them a human interaction, an opportunity to feel empathy for this NPC, that is a way of building that connection and having a greater impact. So, that's just my last thoughts before we start to sign off. So, where can folks interact with you and give you money, all the monies? So let's start with Sin. Where can people find you and monies you?
Hi, again, I'm Sin. I am Diwata ng Manila on Twitter, or Diwata Manila. I have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/diwatamnl. And then I have my itch, which is diwatamnl.itch.io. Yeah, you can find all of my games there, and you can support me on Patreon. My lowest is at $1. So it's just $1 per month. Yay. That's me. How about you, Zedeck?
Yep, I'm Zedeck. I'm Zedeck Siew on social media generally. And you can find my stuff, and our stuff, I would say, at 1000islands.com. PDFs available.
And if people can post links in here, that would be good. So give links to your itch accounts, etc.
On the chat? Okay.
Yeah, in the chat so that people can find us.
This is the double exposure server?
The Twitch chat if you can, and the double exposure panel cast. All these things are good. I can try to figure it out as well. So for me, I'm Genesis of Legend Publishing, and if you want to help me out, go check out some of the amazing games that are currently on offer for the METATOPIA bundle. There is a co-op bundle full of super amazing games, and all proceeds go towards the fine folks who are running METATOPIA and certain panelists. This includes my game Palanquin, which is a game about NPCs who are escorting the princess to her aunt's palace after a palace coup. And I believe you have a game in here, don't you, Sin?
Yeah, I do. I have my Succulent Sorcerers. The Succulent Sorcerers is a game where you play as sentient garden plants. And you go on adventures and you try to defend your home against bugs that try to eat you.
Yeah, so I recommend that people check it out, pick up a whole bunch of experimental games, and have fun. So thank you all for coming, particularly at this late hour for folks EST. So have an excellent evening.